credits.
Come on.
Just in
Oh
time.
my God. Thanks, Siri.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You make that any louder?
Did you say you have
Good, actually.
A2?
They're second row back in the front.
Yeah.
There's 3 of them.
Yep, I see where you are. Do you want, like?
No, go for it, yeah.
I thought I liked the heat,
Watch
but I don't have a coat.
Brandon.
Oh, well, it's breezy outside.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm like, I enjoy the
When
heat,
is it?
but I'm not wearing a coat.
Well, I'm going, it starts.
I do have a coat.
The third.
I have over there. What are you talking about?
Not,
You'll need it. You'll need it.
Yep.
Well, it's not.
no,
too bad.
not too bad,
It's
huh?
not too bad. When I was walking the dog, so I needed a jacket outside. The breeze,
Right about.
the sun was good, but then the shade was.
I'd like to go see him though.
I like it right now. The mornings and evenings are great.
Good.
Very good.
Right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the 4 p.m. work session of the City Council on June 3rd, 2025, just 2 days prior to my birthday, just in case you wanted.
All right.
The record reflects.
That was subtle.
Settled, no, not.
You have a list of gift ideas or anything, Marcia?
Yeah.
Love $50.
Cash.
Yeah,
Nordstrom.
yeah.
Just as long as.
There's only a few things on the
Yeah.
council agenda. Are there any questions about it? Brandon, anything about the youth council?
Just their annual report,
Okay.
and some of them will be here to help me present.
Great. Okay. Just the proposed tentative budget, the public hearing and the hazardous conditions amendments that Kevin Brown will be here, so. Other than that, not much on the agenda. Wow. Let's get started then. How's that sound? Oh, let the record reflect that everyone is here. However, Sean Myers has not arrived yet. Sorry about that. Yeah, just looked around.
Well, he wasn't on the bus.
He was here?
No. he
Oh, I
wasn't.
thought he would, yeah. All right, with that, Justin, if you want to come up, Justin Zorns, he was here as well. There he is.
Chair, I think this is the first time we've had an item specifically in work session to talk about the utility transfers, so hopefully be able to provide some information, answer any questions that you may have. So I just what I did is I took the information that council staff, they do a great job in the presentations they give. They've given in prior years when we talk about this topic in the public hearing. And so I used some of the verbiage from their prior presentations to kind of explain and go through the purpose of this transfer. As you recall, we are required by the state to notify users if we're proposing to transfer funds out of an enterprise fund. And with the budget, each year we do request that utility transfer, which is equivalent to a 12% transfer. And so just going through these bullet points, the enterprise funds are accounted for separately and they're intended to support themselves through user fees or charges for services, such as utility rates. So water, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and refuse are our utility enterprise funds. We do have other enterprise funds, but where these ones have specific users, that's why we notice these ones. The transfers are part of the proposed budget, and the approval or denial of the transfer would happen with the adoption of the budget when that is considered. And then again, as a reminder that this particular transfer is intended to serve as a payment in lieu of franchise and property taxes that are not currently collected because these are utilities that the city owns. And so we do not collect a property tax or a franchise tax from them like we would an Enbridge or Rocky Mountain Power. And then just additionally, we also have a 5% administrative fee. This is not noticed because this is not a transfer, but it's a fee that we are allowed to collect, and it's to help offset costs associated to cover the costs for things like legal, risk management, human resources, accounting services, payroll, et cetera, things like that. So since each of these utilities don't have their own human resources groups running food. Those are centralized within this for the city that provide that service across the city. Any questions about any of?
Can you just remind us how long has the city been doing the enterprise fund transfers? What's the history on that?
So I've been here for 10 years and we've been doing it as long as I've been here. I don't on it, to be honest, I don't know how many years, but it's been a very long time that we have. It's only been in the last 11 years that the state required that we notice it. We've been doing this transfer longer than that.
And have the rates changed on what the city has done with the percentages? Have those been pretty constant, at least in the 10 years?
I believe it's been the 12% every
Yeah.
year, the 12 and the 5. They came up with
So
those
it's
percent.
not something that gets adjusted every year. It's pretty much set that way.
Flat percent. Yep.
I'll just add, I've been here, this is my 19th budget. It's been this way since before I came.
Okay, thank you.
To kind of just give some numerical information as to how so in the notice that went out to all the utility users in the city, the amount that was noticed, totals just over $7 million coming from the 4 utilities. The way that's calculated is if you look in the notice, we list what the total budget for expenditures for each of those funds are. And then we list what the transfer amount is, and that's not necessarily equal to 12%. And that's because the 12% is calculated off of the fees that are associated that we will charge based on usage. And a lot of times these funds, because of capital projects, will budget a use of fund balance for those. Because as we charge those fees, those excess revenues go into these individual utilities, into their funds, and then we will use them in future years for projects, for capital projects. So it's not necessarily 12% of the revenues that are budgeted, but it's 12% of the user fee revenues. And so just to give you an idea of what that is, the impact that is for the general fund proposed budget this year is just shy of $95 million. So 7 million of that is coming from those utilities. Just under 23 million is property tax revenue. 27 million is sales tax revenue. 10 million is from other taxes like our other franchise tax agreements. And then the rest of the budget is made up of 34 million, which includes that 7, but this is your your charges for services. So for like Marshall White fees, golden hour fees, recreation fees, all those other things make up. And then also intergovernmental revenues as well that we may receive, like our BNC road funds and property active transportation funds. So as you can see, it's not a huge portion of the general fund, but it is a decent amount that is contributed to the general fund that's helped for operations within the general fund. But any questions on these numbers here?
No, I just want to comment. I think one of the things that Ken was trying to get at, and maybe we get questions every year of why don't we just leave it in the franchise or enterprise fund?
Mhm.
And you kind of briefly touched upon that, but why don't we?
It's a great question. And I know last year we had a LRB that we enlisted LRB's help with doing a study to kind of go through and show the need. And so because we've been doing this transfer for so long, and it's not a specific use, the 7 million isn't specifically, but it is to support operations in the general fund for fire, for police. And so if you remove that transfer and were to keep it, yes, it would support the utilities more by not needing to have that amount going out. But now we'd be left in a deficit in the general fund that would have to be made up through more than likely. And in the study that was done last year by LRB, they were able to go through and show that the burden on taxpayers would be higher by having it on their property taxes than it would be paying through their utilities, because not every property in the city pays property taxes. Everybody will have utilities. And so it helps to spread that cost out a little bit more to help. And the state does allow this. This is something the state offers as an avenue, and we are allowed to do this. So I know that's been another question that people have commented, that the legality of whether or not we can do this, and the state does allow that we transfer funds from utilities to the general fund.
Just to put a finer point on that point is we have a very large amount of nonprofits in Ogden that would not pay that contribution if it were a property tax, but they do because it is in the utility bill. That's why it shifts.
Correct.
And I don't know what the percentage of the nonprofit is, but you probably do.
I don't, but I know that we do have a large base of nonprofits, churches, I guess.
Government.
That's with government, buildings, school district. There's a lot of properties in the city that don't pay property tax.
Yeah,
But it's about 12% of the parcels that are tax exempt, but it's like 40% of the whole
Geographic.
geographic area.
Oh, okay.
So,
Really, 40% is.
and that would include roads and yeah,
Yeah, wow.
all government properties, Weber State, Intermountain, all of those huge campuses.
And Jeannie, can you repeat that again? It's 40%.
40% of the geographic area of Ogden City is
Okay.
tax exempt.
Okay.
Or doesn't pay taxes.
That is the thing that has helped to calm down the people that come to me with their hair on fire is that point. If you can make that, sometimes it's hard to explain that. They just see it as a big transfer that they have to pay. And,
Or otherwise, their utility rates would be lower.
Right.
right.
Yeah, a lot of them just, why don't you cut my utility bill?
Yep. That's where they start.
Right?
Exactly where they start.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I mean, if we kept it in those enterprise funds, more than likely we wouldn't, because there is such a need for infrastructure. Eventually there may not be a reduction because we would leave it in the fund to continue to help with replacement throughout the city too, because of our aging infrastructure. So there's a lot of things to consider with.
Yep.
Thanks for that explanation.
Chair, just another question. I don't know how to quantify this per se, but I know that with the canyon water line replacement and everything that we looked at there, and there was a water rate adjustment based on that. And so I'm wondering if there's any analysis on these transfers to see if because of the other increase, if that's going to create a larger percentage, it's the same percentage, but a larger dollar value. And if that, maybe it would be appropriate to look at that to see, do we adjust the percentage because we know that the water rate. Now you just explained that we obviously have large infrastructure needs in the city, and that was primarily the purpose of that. But I'm just, again, from the enterprise fund transfer aspect, I just wonder if there's been any analysis or if that's something we ought to look at. So.
And we can certainly do that. I mean, I think we did actually discuss this last year when you did the additional increase in the water. And, I think there's some other things that we can discuss, maybe for future years and how we approach it. It is a policy decision.
Right.
And it's a policy decision that was started by, a council 25, 30 years ago. They made that and, we've been living with it. And now, to unwind something like that would take some time and effort and a lot of thought and determining what's the best for the city, for the utilities, for the residents.
And I don't know that, like I'm saying, necessarily unwind it all together, but maybe more just look at the numbers and see is it still appropriate, and maybe there's an adjustment that should be considered. Just knowing that water rate adjustments those are coming, and how that might impact this transfer and what. Yeah. So anyway.
So in reference to the extra 4%.
Yeah.
That's.
And the inflationary adjustment.
Right.
Can I just clarify what I think I'm hearing? So you're kind of saying, maybe it's not the percent. As we do the percent, the amount will continue to grow. So maybe it's like a flat fee or an adjustment to the percent or something.
Yeah, that's all I'm wondering is if it's instead of a 12%, maybe it's 11.5, and then it drops down a little bit, just to make sure that it's fair and appropriate is all.
Yeah.
Definitely something that we can look at and what that impact would be due to the 4%. Because it's just over these 5 years, correct? That we have that extra 4%.
Yeah. The initial.
Beyond that, it's would just be the inflationary amount. But yeah, definitely something that we could do some evaluation on. And the last piece of information, and this is a little small, but what I wanted to show here is the total expenditure budget for each of those 4 funds, and show what percentage of the transfer out, what percentage that makes up of the total budget. So in the notice it talked about, so like in water, that the transfer of 3.4 million was approximately 9.44% of total expenditure budget. This is a list of all the different types of expenses in those funds. So a good portion of each of those budgets is personnel and operating and capital. And so that gives you an idea of what percentage to the transfers make up in each of those 4 utilities. And again, just to give you that information. And then the administrative fee line, that would be the 5% amount that is to help cover some of those administrative fees that were discussed earlier.
So when you say that the budget for personnel that comes out, that is paid through the city, that's paid back to the city to cover the costs.
So
Those city
just-
employees.
These are the specific utility funds and the personnel in them. So each of them have their own employees assigned. So not all employees are in the general fund. So the employees that are specific for the water utility, they're budgeted for and paid for out of the water utility. So that 6.5 million is to fund the number of employees for water. And so the user fees that are collected help to cover that cost, as well as other costs for operating and running the funds.
So just to clarify for me, those funds are paid through those enterprise funds, or are they paid through the city and then reimbursed back to the city?
Through those funds. So as the user fees are collected, they're collected. So for water, as those fees are collected, they stay in the water fund, that revenue. And then that revenue is used to pay for the personnel for water, but then also for that transfer out, which is part of this, the 12%.
So are the employees of those entities, those enterprise funds, are they employees of the city, or are they?
They are, but they're funded through the specific utilities to which they are part of. So each utility has its own employees running, the water, the refuse, the sewer. So they're not, we don't account for all employees in the general fund. We account for them in whatever specific area they were responsible for. And so if there's fees collected in these enterprise funds for those individuals, they're accounted for basically on their own set of books.
Right.
Yeah, so they operate, would it be fair, they operate within their own silo? Okay,
Yes.
and then the city general fund pulls money out of that silo in the amount of 12% plus
Plus the 5, which the 5 is to cover other items such as accounting, legal, HR, so that is a function that these utilities don't have.
So is that number up there, Justin?
Which one?
The 5%?
Yes, so the administrative, I clicked on it. The line that says administrative fee, that would be the 5%. So that 1.4 million in water, 764,000 in sewer, that's the 5%.
Okay, and none of them are showing as 5%. I think you explained that before. Would you take
Yes.
another run at that for me?
Yeah, so the administrative fee and the transfer out, the 12 and the 5, they're based off of the revenues associated with the fees generated, not the total revenues that we budget for in those.
Okay.
Because
Okay, yep.
it's a little confusing, and I've had a few citizens call trying to understand, if you say it's 12%, why does it not say 12%?
Yep.
So
Can you repeat that again? Dave picked it up a lot quicker than I did.
So when we budget for a fund, we have to balance it.
Right.
And typically for these enterprise funds where we have capital projects, a lot of those revenues are generated probably from a prior year. And so then at the end of the year, those excess funds go into the fund balance for that enterprise fund. So then when we budget to use them in the next year, we'll budget an expense for the capital, but then there has to be an offset, and we do that as a use of fund balance. And so there's not necessarily a revenue that's received because it was received in the prior year. And so it's just an accounting mechanism that we have to do so that we balance our budget. But when we're doing the 12%, we're not using that amount. That amount's not included. It's only the fees that are being charged during that year, the expected revenue from those fees that we're basing that 12 and 5%. Okay. That helped. Clears mud.
I'm getting there. Thank you.
Any other questions? That was all the slides I had prepared. But if there's any other questions or?
Any other questions?
And if I could just say thanks to Justin for doing this presentation. He's right. I don't think that we've ever had a work session discussion on this. At least in depth. And I thought because you do get a lot of questions, that this might be an opportunity to ask questions you have so that you can answer your constituents when you get those questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You want to hang out there for a second since,
You can sit here. I'll sit down there.
whichever. Try it down here just for a different perspective. I don't know. So I'm sorry, Chair, if you want to.
Glenn, how are you?
Yeah.
Pretty hungry?
Yeah.
It's a little early.
Wait.
How'd you get on at 4:20?
All right.
So this is kind of a two-parter. So the first one I'll cover, and then I asked Justin to hang out there since he'll be talking about the A1 changes. So as we go through the budget, we try to take notes and gather up the things that we think you as council members want to continue to talk about, or maybe you want to see change. And so here's the list of the things we've taken note of. So the first one, so I'll go through each of these one by one and you all can talk about them. So I'll just introduce it, say any information that we have on it, and then let you all have a discussion about whether you want to make a change to the final budget or if you want to make any other kind of a change or have anything to add to these. So the first one is some discussion about changing the merit increase for general employees from 1.5% to 2%. So we talked, all the weeks are running together, a week or so ago about the compensation proposal. And there was some discussion about that and a question of how much that would cost if we wanted to go to 2% instead of the 1.5. And that's about $200,000 total. And Justin was good enough to give me a breakdown. It would be about 120,000 for the general fund and 80,000 for all the other funds to make up that 200,000 for a 2% merit instead of a 1.5% merit. So if that's something that you all are interested in, I think the assumption would be that that 200,000, if you wanted to do that, would come out of the carry forward for the unused wages and benefits. There was about $1.5 million left in there for that. So this is for you to discuss and give us direction if you want to, or ask us any other questions you might have. So we'll, like I said, we'll take them one at a time. So if there's anything you want to talk about here, we'll take that one.
Clarify.
Yeah, go ahead.
As I kind of worked through that little process, we asked Janine to give us some data from our surrounding city from her counterparts in those cities. What's going on in those cities for budget process. It looked to me like this 2% would keep us in the middle of the range of everybody else. It's not gonna put us on top, but it'll keep us kind of in pace with our other communities that tend to want to poach our people. And if we can kind of keep our employees happy because they are getting paid an average wage at least. It seemed wise to do that. It also, from past experience, it's really hard to catch up. It's really hard to kind of, when you get behind, it's hard to catch up. So I kind of like the idea of moving that up a 0.5%, just to keep us in the range.
Me too.
Seeing lots of head nod.
Yeah, me3.
We've had some discussions amongst ourselves and I agree. Using their numbers, I think the 2% is valid and stays within their range and where we want to be. I agree. It's easier to piece it along year by year than to fall behind and then have to figure out a way to catch up for a dramatic catch up. So I agree. I think this is something that we're in a position to do, something we can do. And I would be in favor of that also.
And where we've got some money in a fund, it doesn't trigger any kind of a tax increase or anything. So the citizens are not gonna feel that. So I think that's all the more reason to do it now.
Okay.
Just had that 5-year financial plan.
Can I just bring one point up that I would think about if I were implementing that plan, just thinking of the dollar impact that has, is it's not just this year. I mean, from here
Mhm.
on out, it continues to have that recurring impact
Mhm.
of that additional 2% based on this year. And then you go forward next year, it compounds double 4%. And so, well, but it'd be 5% per year. And I'm not speaking for or against. I just want to speak out and say, this is going to be something that occurs now and forever on. So I don't want to say that I'm for or against it. I just, for me personally, if I'm looking at how this impacts the city, I'm thinking of, this is not just this year, but it's every year moving on that has a continued impact. So this year be 5, next year be 1%, then the following year be 1.5. So that's a consideration that I would look at if it were just, operationally for my own budget and my own business.
Mhm.
So again, I don't want to be negative. I just want to make sure we put everything out on the table and say, is that something that the city is going to commit to from here moving forward? Because it's a big commitment. And it's more than just 5%, honestly, over several years period of time. So it's not just this year and say, oh, we got some extra money this year, let's commit it to this.
Yeah, I don't look at it as we've got extra money as much as it is, let's not fall behind. I mean, it was a big leap to get, last year to get to an average. And if we start slipping behind, then we're just setting ourselves on the flip side of that, Sean, is we set ourselves up for another big jump at some point in time if we need to.
Right.
If we realize we're not competitive anymore in the municipal employment marketplace.
But let me just go back to the other point is this is the merit increase. And then we have also another percentage of increase that employees receive over and above that is not a merit increase. It's just the compensation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cost of living increase, which I'm sorry, I don't remember that percentage.
2.97.
2.97. So that ends up being pretty big, if you add the merit increase into that 2.97.
It's a lot smaller than the public safety. Okay.
No question. But if you were to look under Zion's Bank this year for what pay increases are done across in the business world, they're between 3 and 4%. And that's bigger than 3 or 4%. If you average, if you add it all together. So I'm not being a negative. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer or naysayer or anything. I just want to say, let's look at this from the big picture and what the impact is financially to the city over long term.
I think it's a great point, and it really underscores what Chair White's been saying. If we can get a financial, that really is important. I think we need to look not just 1 year, and those are all valid points to that. And so, I think as the counterpoint, the citizen might say, well, if we can come up with this 0.5%, why aren't we looking at ways to get that back to the taxpayer? And I think that's probably the other saying, we're not going to have to charge more in taxes, which is true, but why, if we've got that money to make this adjustment, that's I think the other thing we need to consider with that.
So can I just, and this is for the three of you, I think it was Friday, I was looking over the leadership notes and there's a couple bullet points in here. So I know you had discussion in leadership. Is there anything else? It looks like Janine had some insight on it too. Do you have anything else you want to share about that?
Actually, what I did was copy what I'd sent a couple of weeks ago. So maybe I'll need to look that up.
Okay, there's some bullet point or some paragraphs. So I just thought maybe, obviously you guys had some discussion.
Well, I think I just commented basically what Sean said, that, it is ongoing.
Mhm.
If you do this, and we do have good benefits, which is a point that Sean had made a couple weeks ago when we had this discussion. And we might have discussed it, but we didn't come to any conclusions.
Okay.
Just basically, here's what my research or, just asking my counterparts in other cities what the numbers were, and I gave you those.
Okay,
So,
that was all.
and I think just from the employees' perspective, police and fire are getting a COLA, and so the 2.9% plus 4%, which is what their merit steps are. And how would other employees view that, right? Are they less important than public safety.
And I know we'd talked about that too, and that's what I was curious about, if you guys had touched on that subject or had more information on that. So thank you.
I had the discussion with a colleague, a friend, last night who retired as a director for the city. And he said in the 27 years that he worked in the private sector, he set up his own retirement and he paid in it. It was a match that he had in the private sector. And he came to work for Ogden City for 10 years. This is just to kind of dovetail off what Janine said. In the 10 years he worked for Ogden City, he was able to put away more in his own personal retirement than he did in the previous 27 years when he worked in the private sector. And so, you know, the benefits are, as Janine stated, they are outstanding. And that's a huge benefit too, that I don't know that we always weigh in consequence. I agree that we have, you know, we need to take care of our people. And I don't want to be negative about this. I just like to put it all out on the table because this is a dilemma that I go through every year when I sit down to evaluate my own employees in my own business. Well, forgive me for bringing that to the table again, but it is just, for me, it's a very important point that you try to calculate checks and balances and where you're going to be, not just this year, but where you're going to be next year. As you calculate the impact of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think that was a good point that needs to be discussed. So don't feel bad about that at all.
Okay, now,
Do we know what that amount is? Have we been able to calculate the amount between 1.5% and 2%?
200,000.
Right.
It's 2.5,
That's the,
85, yeah.
and originally you had kind of looked at a number higher than that.
Yeah, Janine had me run numbers for 2%, 3%, 4%.
Now, when you were looking at the budget, wasn't there a number somewhere between
The 2.27 or whatever, the 2.4.
Oh, the total amount?
No, I think what she's referencing is how you used the justification you used for the difference between public
Progressive
safety.
free gal.
Yeah,
Yeah, what from the, it was
2.24.
2.24 was
Yeah.
that amount that based on if you were to compare years of service to get through your range relative to what takes years of service for police to
oh,
get through their steps, it would take about a 2.24% merit increase annually to progress through.
if you stayed 30 years or something.
Yeah.
I think one of the things for me is that it seems as though we're always going to have vacancies, and I think that kind of helps me understand that we might be able to do this without, I don't know how long if we just had this financial plan done, we would figure out when we're gonna get to that point, but at least at this point, we're relying on those vacancies, and it seems like even unless we're gonna get 100% full, which it doesn't seem like we've hit that in 15 years or whatever, we're always gonna have that amount, whatever that amount is, to carry over. So I feel like we're in a pretty good spot to do this. I guess where the money's coming from, I guess, is my point, not necessarily.
We want to try to get to 10% on all fronts, whereas we had some variation. And I guess I see this is one way to do that, as we finally are getting to a point where we have full staff in some places. And I just think that shows good faith to the employees, and I don't like the inequity between the two different groups of employees, and so I feel like this helps with that just a little bit, even though we can't possibly do the $1 million or whatever it would be to match them up completely.
and when you're talking about the 10%, you're talking about retention. Is that what you're?
Yeah, when we were talking about, that's kind of
Yeah.
a normal thing, but we saw in the different departments that some are below and some are above, and it just depends on the year or what's going on, but I think that's a good measure.
Well, another good thing is we have to do a budget every year and this always gets reviewed. So,
Yes.
and we do benchmarks and we see where we're at.
So help me clarify this. When we talk about changing that from 1.5 to 2%, is that this year? Or is that something we're trying to look forward to permanently?
Well, merit changes from time to time. It's not always constant. So.
The sworn officers, they are built in, the merit is in the schedule. So that isn't, but this one I think is one that could change.
Because that puts it at about 6, not quite, almost 6%.
We can always change their schedule too. I mean,
That's true. That's true. We changed it last year to what it is now.
So public safety with the COLA and their step would be 6.97%.
Almost 7%.
For public safety.
Right, and then
And this
non-sworn.
one, 4.9.
They got-
And everybody, and the others
would be
4.9.
9.7.
Yeah. And I think, you know, again, taking it smaller chunks at a time, staying in that range is a more appropriate response than I think the city went for years with no increases, and then to try and get everyone up to it was pretty painful. And that's where we've seen some of the increases.
It was painful on a lot of fronts. I think, I mean, we've done it numerous times, right? Throughout the last 10 years, we try to stay competitive. And then we have departments that maybe are more, I don't know if they're more sought after, but seem in higher demand and then leave. And then we find out that it's because of salary. And so we make adjustments to fix that. But yeah, I mean, there's fees and costs on both sides. It's great to have the directors come and tell us that A, that their departments are fully staffed, B, that their departments and their employees are happy to be here. And I would hate to see us, I don't think we're taking advantage of it, but I think I think we should continue to try to do what we've been doing to create that momentum and not let it dip. Because it does cost money. It does cost money to retrain and to hire and to find new people and to continue to pay overtime when a department's not fully staffed.
Yeah.
So there are costs on both sides. I just want to remind us all of that also.
Just remember, was it like two or 3 years ago when we did that increase for the general staff, and that person coming and saying, if you wouldn't have done that this week, I would have lost my housing,
Mhm.
right? It's like people are living in a precarious situation, and
Yeah.
I think, although our benefits are great, they don't pay the mortgage or the
And
rent.
don't buy
right?
groceries.
It's a challenge.
The young kids don't care about benefits.
And that's what they told us, right? We were
Right.
talking about that with public safety and everything. They don't know yet why it's so important.
Because they're invincible.
Exactly. They don't need health insurance. They don't need
No, they're good.
retirement.
Or they're under 26,
Yeah.
they're living at home and under the umbrella of their
Because
parents.
they can't afford a house yet. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, my perspective is your perspective of the taxpayer too. And, you know, a nearly 6% increase in pay is more than what most taxpayers are going to experience this year.
Say that again, Sean.
So average Joe who works in his job is probably not, according to Zions Bank statistics, is probably getting at I'm going to average it and say 3.5% increase. And they don't divide it up into COLA or merit. They just say it's going to get a 3.5 pay increase. So if you go on Zion Bank, look underneath pay increase for 2025, that's what the average is right now, is 3.5. So Joe Blow taxpayer is going to probably get about a 3.5% increase in his wage. If he gets an increase, you just, you never know. Some companies do and some don't. Some will do more, some will do less, but that's the average. And so if you consider that for a taxpayer, and then we compare that to what we're doing for the city, and it's nearly 6%, that's, it's not double, but it's pretty significant increase in wages. So if you look at where the taxpayers are at and what kind of, what kind of budget they're experiencing, that's my perspective too, I guess.
So when we look at Zions, and not to be antagonistic at all, but if we assume that, one might assume that those working in the bank.
This is not Zion's Bank.
Oh, this is
their
the
service
economic
area.
report.
It's their economic
Okay.
report of what
Gotcha.
their businesses, they do
Thanks for
that study every
clarification
year.
on that,
You can
yeah.
go on the same thing on payscale.com and I've been there, I've done that, and
Yeah.
I look it up and it's pretty similar. It's between 3% and 4% for the last couple of years.
Okay, yep.
With that argument, then I would suggest we would also lower the public safety budget too. I don't understand why they would get a huge increase and we would say
Right.
3.5 for the general employees. I respect all of
Mhm.
them. I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm just saying, there's a disparity there. Why would they get more than a person working on the general staff?
Mhm.
I'm gonna take a shot at it, but I don't know that this is true. You know, they have been you know, on the really underside of things for a while, based on how easy it has been for us to have our people picked off.
The public safety.
The public
Yeah,
safety.
No, I'm not arguing, I'm arguing.
that's
more
why I
for
think that,
employees.
you
I'm
know,
just saying, like, under that logic.
Oh, I understand. I understand exactly what
Yeah.
you're saying, but, and that's why I said I don't know the answer, but I look at it from the perspective of a public safety person. And if they don't get paid very well compared to what their risk is in, you know, their job. So, they look at other jurisdictions to see what, you know, see how rosy it is over there. And, you know, we have been catching up.
Oh, for sure. And I'm just saying that in the perspective of kind of looking at if most people are getting 3.5,
Yeah.
we want to lower one group, then it would be beneficial to also look at that. And I'm not arguing for that at all.
No, I'm
I-
not
I also-
arguing either.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to throw it out, just
Yeah.
something
But I
to.
also appreciated in the public services department, I'm talking about, I mean, they're in the parks, encountering some very challenging times too, so they don't even carry a weapon. Except for like a rake, maybe.
So, I mean, I think if I remember right,
Hmm.
we were starting to see an uptick in turnover from non-public safety employees. If I can't remember,
I can't remember. I have to-
Depends on which department, I think. It was kind of,
not this year, but in previous years. And so I think that's what my fear is that we're gonna get back to them. And it costs a lot of money to rehire and hire. So, and for several years, we weren't even keeping up with cost of living. So, I mean, I think that was part of it too. We're just so far behind.
And that is built into the 1.5 because you have the 1.5 plus you had the 3.97, Janine?
2.97.
2.97. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
2.97.
So the 2.97 is the cost of living.
Right. And then the other is the merit.
So I'll just do a check-in here with everybody. It sounds, we could have some more discussion. This is something that would go into the Schedule A1 changes. Are there concerns? Do you want to have more discussion about this? Or are you generally okay that this goes into the Schedule A1 consideration?
I'm generally okay.
Okay.
I would like to know the financial impact, just not just this year, but moving forward. Personally, that's just,
Oh my God, that is twice I've heard it tonight.
I'm so sorry.
Financial plan.
With the future, move it into the future. Before we leave the topic, Marcia, you had mentioned, and we talked a little bit about what is in the turnover number.
Mhm.
So have we talked to administration about, is it possible to separate retirement from turnover? So in other words, I'm leaving or you're fired is one group that is measured for turnover, and retirements are left out of it. Because that's gonna happen regardless of their level of happiness of their position.
And money isn't gonna keep people from retiring. It also doesn't have much of an effect on whether we fire them or not. In my mind. So who's voluntarily leaving? That's what I
Right.
want to know.
Well, voluntarily leaving to go to Clearfield because they're paying me $2 more an hour.
That's the one I want to know. How much,
Right.
how many of those are happening?
Right,
And that's just a part of the turnover number.
right.
I think that's hard too, because you've got people that can actually retire because they have enough years in,
Right,
whether that's
Do
public
some
safety
ranking.
or
Yeah.
not, non-public safety, and yet they still are moving to a different job because they can
Of
For more.
course, yeah.
for more money. And so the question is, how do you, what bucket do you put them in then at that point? So I don't know. I don't, just hard one.
Well, that's a years of service and money isn't gonna change the number of years of service. You're right. At least that's the thought process that I have.
So maybe we need a little more conversation between us.
it's gonna need some finessing for sure. You know, if you look at Chief Young, he retired,
Right, that's what I mean.
but he's working.
But he went to the
Yeah.
public or private sector. Right, that's what I mean.
Exactly.
And would he have stayed longer?
Do we count that as turnover or is that retirement?
I think it's a little bit of both.
I think that's just the way they do it, you know? When these guys that have a 20-year retirement, they may stay
That's
longer
fine.
than that, but
Yeah.
you know, but since they can draw retirement and work, that's a perk,
Yeah,
you know? We can't put that perk into our benefits package. That's just never gonna happen.
right. No, you're right. But just as far as a measure of, are we losing people? The $2 more an hour somewhere. I think that's what we're getting at is, are we
Right.
competitive in the marketplace with regard to our wages?
Yeah,
And we need to be sure that we're focusing on the group that's leaving because of wages and not because they've chosen to leave employment with the city
mhm,
because they're eligible to draw their retirement.
right. Yeah, maybe we're all saying the same thing.
I think so.
You know, yeah.
I think also, the last couple of years, we've made at least 2 increases that were fairly decent to get people up to where we hoped they would be. And so just knowing that, every inflation's impacting every business and wages are going up, it's just, is this 1.5 or is 2 probably more appropriate? I think I'm okay with that. It feels like it's keeping us in that range. Falling behind, I think, is something we've done too often. And if we can stay in the ballpark, that helps. So.
And
It's not like we're moving to the top. We're
No, yeah.
moving to the middle.
And at the 1.5, we are at the bottom of the increases with our surrounding cities.
and I just want to follow up, and this is, I'm not suggesting we do this, but what's the dollar amount if we were to lower public safety to the 2%?
I think we'd have to look at it. I don't know. We have that off the top of our head.
Well, then there's the unintended consequences that you can't measure. How many people do you have to retrain again because you lose them? And
I'm just saying, I'm just, what I'm trying to get at is it a way different amount of money over here to bring them down to the same amount instead of us trying to bring it up? I guess I was just following up on.
Yeah, and I just want to
Angela.
reiterate, I am not arguing for lower.
I'm just saying,
It was just an equity issue.
numbers, I mean, if we're gonna have that conversation, we have to have it on all sides and the data behind all sides. So I'm not advocating for that either. But I'm just saying, we've got to have that discussion on all sides if we're gonna.
Agreed.
So can I just ask a clarifying question? I understand the turnover and looking at turnover and what causes turnover. I think we're in a good spot in turnover. I think all of the directors reported healthy turnover numbers, which is great. I don't think that's been that way for a long time. Maybe in some departments, but definitely not in all. And so I'm pleased that where we're at. So I guess what are we trying to accomplish by looking at turnover and what causes turnover and why? I just don't, I don't know if that's our role. And number 2, I mean, I guess if we want to just kind of continue to monitor it, that's a different story than actually trying to dig into the numbers of why people are leaving. I don't think that's really, I think we have
More than.
employees,
well,
city employees.
to me, it's just an indicator. It's just one indicator as to what the health of our benefits package is, pay and everything. If we start having no turnover, well, we're probably paying too much. If we start having 30% turnover, well, we're probably not paying enough. So it's just an indicator to me, I don't think it is the thing that you
And I guess,
hang your hat on and,
yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I guess my argument is rather than us dive into that, I feel like we get that. I guess if we went through the budget process and everyone was like, oh, we had 1% turnover or we had
Mhm.
0% turnover, then maybe we need to dive into something. That's what I'm questioning. It feels like we're healthy right now. We're right in 10%, which is normal, which is kind of where we want to be. We're right there close. I guess I'm not understanding why we would want to dig into that more, or what does it matter if it's retirement or people leaving. Yeah, again, if it was 25%, then I think we need to figure something out. Or if it was 0%, but whereas that we're healthy and kind of where we want to be, I guess I'm just curious why we would spend more time digging into something that it looks like we're where we want to be anyway. Does that make sense?
It does. And I
So-
brought it up just
Yeah,
as an indicator.
okay,
But no, I don't disagree with you at all.
okay. When I'm like, well, what are we trying to get to?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to say that. If Glenn's still talking. I'm hungry.
More.
But we need to make.
Bullet
So-
point number 2.
Number 2.
Are we already there?
Well, I think we got through a lot of that. Like,
So there were some questions about the mental health services for the public safety employees. So the sworn officers get one service and the non-sworn, even though they're in public safety, don't get that. And so there were some questions about how much would it cost to expand that, or if we could. Justin's reached out to HR and police, and it doesn't sound like we have any numbers on that yet, but they did want to remind us of some of the other services that are available. So they can access the employee assistance program, the Blomquist Hale things, and some of the other things that are available, like the NICE resources. So those are available, but we know that there is a discrepancy with the public safety with the sworn versus non-sworn. So I think we can keep checking in on that to see what those costs would be and what the contracts would look like. So
And maybe we could find out about that later.
yeah, so we don't have the
Just-
information.
Yeah, probably the biggest thing with me is what is the difference between those services? Not money, but what are they, why would
Yeah.
one need one, what the
Actually,
non-sworn ones?
Yeah, I
need
talked to one
special.
of them at the dinner and I
Yeah.
didn't really know that, I didn't understand this either. But and I could be totally off base, but I'm just gonna try to respond, but it's basically the specialized team and a lot of peers also that can meet with you that, obviously have a similar background because they work in those fields, but then also what I was understanding was like, especially if they're all experiencing the same event, then it would kind of be the same approach with everybody rather than them having to go talk to, like if it's EAP, it's just someone that's gonna help guide you to other services. Eventually, they may not have the same experience with like public safety related kind of issues, but I was just.
Yeah, I think my question was just that I think when the state law came out and required the mental health services, it was available through a grant funding for everybody. And then I don't know, maybe I guess the state only requires it for sworn officers. And so I'm just curious what the cost would be.
Yeah.
Where we had a loss in that space this last year, I think it's worth considering, and keeping employees safe and providing them with what they need, I think is important. So
Okay, we'll keep checking, see if we can find some numbers. The third one is arts maintenance funding. So there was just some discussion about maybe that's not quite enough. This is just open for discussion. We don't have any specific numbers or examples, but this was something that was brought up as something we could look at. So are there concerns? Do we want to investigate this a little bit more? Ask the administration for some more information? At least right now, or is this something that we could look at over the course of the next year?
I don't remember that.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
that.
I remember it.
Yeah.
It's like, I know,
That's something-
there's,
something
is
I
there
said.
contingency
It was
with
something
every
you said.
project now? There's a.
Might have
Oh,
been.
you answered that question though.
So we fund per ordinance.
Did I?
we
Yeah,
fund
okay.
100,000 toward public art, and then we also fund $2,500 into a bucket for maintenance each year, and that
Yeah.
builds up, and then it's available to be used when they
You,
need
you
it.
did say we have a fund already. You can scratch that one.
Yeah, we're not.
I brought it up.
Not scratching the maintenance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get rid of
But I
that
mean,
fund.
but-
No.
We're not
Yeah.
going through that bucket yet, right? It's not like we're eliminating that bucket every year and starting over.
No.
Okay.
To make sure that as we still put all this art up, that we're maintaining it.
Yeah, yeah,
I know that some,
Yeah.
we haven't and been able to.
Mhm. Makes sense.
We're moving through now.
Yeah.
Whether
we go.
$100 a year is enough,
Enough, yeah,
but it does build up and carry over whatever's not used, and then it's available to be used when they need it.
okay.
Okay, so
Could we, can I ask a question? So, like with arts, we have a cap. We put money in until it gets to a certain dollar amount and then we
That's for the public art, yeah.
public art. Would it be beneficial to look at something like that also for the maintenance? We put so much in a year and when it gets to a certain cap, then we wait and kind of pause on that also? Would it be worth doing that? I'm just asking.
I mean, we can certainly look into it.
Okay.
I
I mean, I guess
I don't- you know how
$2,500
much is in there.
$2,500 a year isn't much, so it's not like it would take a while to build up to, I'm just trying to figure out, is it worth looking at? That's all.
We currently have $34,000.
I would cap it. That's,
We're good.
I'd say 40 and say, maybe take a pause. That's just me.
Yeah. no,
That's something we probably would have to do through an ordinance change.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have to change the ordinance.
I mean, if we're putting $2,500 a year and it's up to 34,000.
A lot of the art's new right
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Later it'll start.
I'm just curious. I mean, I'm not saying yay or nay. I was just curious if that's something we want to look at.
Trying to get rid of the arts.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so the last one on my list is the Trails position or the partnerships with the Trails organizations, and this was Councilmember Graff's discussion. I know there have been some discussions in the last couple of days, and so maybe if I can turn it over to the people who are in those discussions to talk about where we might be for that, or Councilmember Graff.
Why don't,
You're the latest to talk to the mayor, so.
well, I had two conversations yesterday, one with, and this came from feedback from Bart and an idea from Marcia and something that I had filed in the back of my mind too. Rather than hire a position for the city, use a resource that we've already got in the city doing trails work and familiar with our trail system and the property owners along our trails and that sort of thing. So I went and spent an hour and a half with Eric Manning, the executive director at TFNU, formerly Weber Pathways. And he was excited about the whole idea. And I then texted the mayor and the mayor called me and we had an hour and a half discussion last evening about it all. And he was in agreement that our trails need attention. This is an opportunity to really leverage community partners in improving our trails. And it really is boiling down to dollars at this point, I think, and what do they do? And I told the mayor, I'd really like to budget some money this year so that it's available and we can then go to work to define what is done, by whom, where, as kind of a test. And to kind of work out some kinks. And I'm excited about that opportunity. And I hope to find some money somewhere that could do that. When Janine and I spoke yesterday, if I could wave a wand, I'd say $100,000. But I'm open for negotiation. Nobody's looking. 100 it is. But I'm really excited about the opportunity. I really think that we've got an opportunity to really leverage some resources that we've got in the city, both TFNU and OTN. And I think that with some time and some exploration and gaining some understanding and input from those organizations, we can really move the needle on our trails. They're in need of attention, and we can point to Gibbs Loop Trail as one of them. We can point to some of the lower trails that might serve the families and the young bike riders that came up in the conversations around closing the golf course run. This is where my kids learn to ride a bike. This is easy terrain for that on a mountain bike. Well, maybe it's an opportunity to create some terrain that isn't technical, is mostly flat, so that young riders can find some success. I don't know how we prioritize that at this point, but I'm excited about some attention coming to trails.
I agree with that. I think that there needs to be a dollar number. What that number is, maybe it might be helpful to talk to those organizations and get an idea on what could be accomplished over the next year, and then what that cost might be. I mean, if we look at, knowing that there are trails that need some attention and maybe are higher priority than others, but just throwing a number at it without having that conversation of what could realistically be accomplished and what those measurables are, I think that's the piece of the equation I feel like I'd want to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. We don't want to just put money in somebody's hands and say, see what you
Good luck.
do,
Yeah.
but to have some money available to apply to a proposal that's put forth, I think would be a really good start.
And I think and Justin may have an answer on this. There was a report one time I saw, I don't know if OTN gave this, about which trails are being used and trail counts. Does that sound familiar? And maybe looking at the trails in Ogden that are being used the most and seeing where those are and the condition of those trails. And maybe that's part of the equation as well.
The idea of OTN is more directly answerable to us. I mean, they're a quasi-Ogden organization, and even though a lot of the trails that even they watch over aren't in the city limits, they're our adjacent trails. And I think that would be, if we could have somebody in the city that would kind of oversee that whole deal and maybe assess what trail maintenance in a particular section might cost, and then be able to make those, disbursements, I guess,
Yeah, the only.
But the volunteer organization is already in place. That's what I'm saying is, I don't think we need more people. We don't need to hire more people. We got people that'll do it, but we just do need money. I think that's what it is.
Well, it isn't necessarily. So when I originally was thinking about this partnership with TFNU, I was envisioning the model that we employ with the Ogden Downtown Alliance, with the Goal Foundation, with the Nature Center, with the Dinosaur Park. Okay, where once a year they come in and share their goals for the upcoming year and review their success around meeting the goals of the previous year. And that's what I envisioned.
Or is that Ogden Trails Network?
That's OTN, yeah, and we just renewed their charter for another year. And I will say this on the front end, I have very limited experience with OTN. I did play a role in attending their meeting as a planning commissioner. And I have met with now their former executive director and with some board members over coffee. And it seems that their ability to move and be productive ebbs and flows with their volunteer force and their leadership in the form of their board. And at TFNU, they're well established, they're a business, they don't see this kind of turnover. And Eric is willing to work with OTN, and it's a question you have to be answered. But I think that and maybe it's a proposal. Maybe we invite each of the organizations in and give us a pitch. What do you want to do with? How would you approach this? I'm not sure. That's just off the top of my head. I'm not saying no to OTN, but I do have a lot of confidence in what Weaver Pathways / TFNU has done over their lifetime.
Good input.
So we want to try to figure out, we want to be able to put some money away, but we don't know what that amount is
Or where it's coming
or where it's coming from.
I think this year, and I could be wrong, but I think this year should be less than maybe years moving forward, because of that, because we
Yep.
don't know exactly what their goals or successes would be. Plus, I think it would be later in the year that they, I mean, we can't do this until the budget's approved, and then there's some paperwork there, some stuff there. So I think they're dealing with maybe less time this year than moving forward. So I think we're in a good spot to maybe have those conversations, have a dialogue of this is kind of what we're doing moving forward. And we've got some money put aside. We'd love to encourage either trail maintenance or trail development here within the rest of this year. And then we'd love to continue to be a great partner and help fund some of those trail maintenances and trail developments moving forward. And with the agreement that, yeah, we will continue to at some level support financially those endeavors, but we also want to have dialogue on what we feel is important also, and what we feel is most beneficial to Ogden City and the residents we have.
Yeah, and I think initially to dovetail, and I don't want to assume this was in your comments, but we want to see some success too.
Exactly.
What can you do with, so kind of a test.
Yeah. I think everyone here would agree how important our trails are and how important they are to our residents. And I think the more we can do to enhance them and make them more accessible to everyone it benefits everybody. And I think it goes along with what Ogden City's vision is, right? To be able to get out and enjoy them and use and enjoy those trails. So I agree. I think this is a much better approach on both sides. Again, I don't know what the dollar amount is.
I'll ask.
I do support this.
Thank you. Justin, has administration in the last 2 days had an opportunity to kick around a dollar amount?
In visiting today with Lisa and with Janine, we talked earlier. Some amounts that were thrown out to me were 25 to 30,000 as this initial year could be potentially what we could look at. And as far as funding it goes, based on our projections with our interest, we could increase our interest income budget for next year to add that line as the offset. So that is a way that we could add that to the budget for next year.
If you remain proactive and thinking about
Yeah,
that.
I really appreciate it very much.
I have one other thought on other foundation boards that I've served on in the past. They set up grants, and then an organization applies for the grant, and then for them to receive a grant the following year, they have to come back in and report what they did with the funds from the previous year. So I don't know if some mechanism like that works, but that's just something I've seen in the past.
By the way, you're on the committee on the website as a non-voting member of the Ogden Trails Committee.
Really?
Yeah.
Probably because of your planning commission.
So,
Well, that's been a while. Yeah, that's Michelle Williams.
sorry, just like, by the way, yeah,
Pieces.
maybe,
Yeah, well,
thing
it
we're not
looks like
showing
I'm
up to
supposed to
be-
know some stuff, but I don't.
I think it's a great idea. Let's maybe let's keep talking and we can always figure out, do a budget amendment too.
Yeah, we
Do
can.
it right?
Yeah, so you're saying don't include it in this budget?
Let's include it.
No, include it, but if we need more.
Oh, I
if
see.
we need
Gotcha.
more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So would the amount be starting with like 30,000?
I'd love that.
And then if it's something.
I really appreciate the administration on this, and I want to say that publicly. That's really some quick movement on their part, and I really appreciate the support. As a trail user, I've experienced these trails over the years, and without maintenance and upkeep, we've got use that's gone up and we've also got weather that affect these trails. And they don't just hold up, they fall down. And without maintenance, they become even worse.
Especially when Councilmember Ritchie crashes his bike off.
Well, Councilmember Graff has done the same thing, some kind of tough spots. And the other thing is,
Councilmember Hire doesn't take a bike, he walks.
yeah, well, Councilmember Hire is probably smarter than the two others put together.
But there are trails, like there's a portion of Birdsong Trail I haven't been on for several years because
It's gone.
it's closed.
It's closed, yeah,
It's gone,
yeah.
And, there's that portion there that really
but it
needs.
should have been gone.
What's
Have you
that?
ever tried to do?
So anyway, that goes to the relationships, you know, with
Absolutely.
a consistent relationship with the King family around their concerns with regard to what's happening on that trail on their property, I think enables a greater possibility that that trail is
Mhm.
repaired, maintained, the Kings are happy, the bicyclists and the hikers are happy, and we all move forward because there's relationships in all of this. Because there is a spectrum of ownership across, just from the canyon to Buse Trail.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, Schedule A1 changes.
Turn it over to Justin to go over all of those.
Could I have you pull up the?
Sure.
I had sent an initial version of the Schedule A1 to council staff, and then we had a few other items that came up, so. This would be the PDF, but yeah, there, yeah.
Let me just.
Oh.
Here.
Is this in our report or is it in the presentation?
So the presentation had it, but we'll have to update it because there were some few items that came up today that
Okay.
added, so we'll get a corrected version to you all,
Okay.
which will include some of these other.
Yeah, so this document was included with the presentation's email,
Okay.
so. Trying to see if I can get to zoom in, there we go.
All right.
All yours.
Thank you, Brandon. All right, so the Schedule A1, so these are some items that administration is proposing to be adjusted as part of the final budget for your consideration. Some of them are cleanup items, then there's a couple of things that have come up recently that we want to propose funding. So just going down the list, as you recall, one of the proposals of the mayor is to consolidate marketing into one group. And so we've moved some full-time positions in an account, and I erroneously forgot that we had some part-time funds under economic development for marketing, and so we needed to move that. So this 37,000 is just moving that part-time under the marketing group. So that's just correcting that line item in the budget. The next couple of items are related to our new markets tax credit. At the time that the budget was proposed, we didn't have the final amounts of what the ground lease that the city is paying to the new market tax credit SPE that's been established. And so this adds in what those amounts are. The SPE operates off of a calendar year. And so we have a 2025 amount and a 2026 amount. We're proposing to add both of those as part of the budget now so that we can do the 2025 payment come July, and then we'll do the 26 payment in January as part of that whole process with the fund of the new markets tax credit and the SPE and everything there. So
Why not make it more difficult?
I know. And to fund those, we're proposing to use using fund balance. So increasing the use of fund balance and adding those payment amounts in. And so the annual amount we'll make sure we'll pick this up in the budget for fiscal year 27 when we go through the balancing process, but that annual amount is 104,475. The last two items on the general fund adjustment, with the airport terminal, there's the funding for baggage carousel that is needed. So with that whole project, and I'd have to ask Jared to speak more to this, but there is a need to still do the baggage carousel, which is 315,000, of which the FAA will cover 90% of it. We have funding for that. And so there is a 32,000 match. And so we're proposing to reduce general fund contingency and transferring that to the airport as part of the budget as the match for the baggage carousel at the airport. And then the other one is with the ARPA funds that were originally appropriated. One of the items that administration was using those funds for was for public safety radio replacement. We had about $152,000 left that we hadn't finished spending out of the ARPA funds and with all the budget amendments that we did so that we could use those funds with public safety. We used that cost savings from the general fund and put it into our fleet and facility fund to be able to still use for radio replacement. And speaking with Chief Matthew, they found out they're needing about $193,000 to finish this last piece of the radio replacement. So we have 150. We need an additional 40. So we're proposing to decrease contingency in the budget and transfer that over to our fleet and facilities fund, where we've budgeted that 150,000 to give them what they need to finish what they're with the radio replacement. So those are the adjustments in the general fund. So it would take the general fund budget from 94,965,575 to 95,145,250. Obviously, this doesn't include what we've discussed today, but those are some of the items that we propose adjusting. In the refuse fund and also in the storm fund, they're opposite amounts. I realized when I was putting together my presentation today for the utility transfers that the line item that we budget for that amount, I switched between the two funds. Our sheet that we fill out for the noticing, we have storm listed first and then refuse, but in our accounting structure, it's the opposite. And so I accidentally switched them. So this is just fixing that. It's just an accounting correction. The notice was correct. Everything that way was correct in the amounts. It's just fixing those. So that's increasing the refuse utility by 130,000. And then there's a decrease in the storm utility by the same amount. In the airport fund, so this is adding in the 32,000 of city match from the general fund, and then also the grant portion to be able to do the baggage carousel, the terminal expand along with the terminal expansion. And then let's see on the next page. So the storm adjustment. So that's just fixing an accounting error. And then in the fleet facilities fund, this would be recognizing the 41,000 being transferred from the general fund for radio replacement. And then under the major grants, there's a couple of adjustments there. Most of these are related to truing up our annual action plan numbers. So each year, community development will provide us with what they're estimating that budget's going to be. And then once they get their final numbers from HUD, before we adopt the final budget, we will true up those budgeted amounts. So this is just truing up to the annual action plan that you'll be considering. And then the last item there, the 100,000. So this is related to, if you recall in Jared's presentation, talking about that we're losing the waiver for low income related to with the home funds that has a match requirement. And so we didn't know at the time what that additional match would be. We do know what it is now. So we currently do 150,000 in match. We need to increase that by another 100,000. The proposal is to have that come from housing. That's where the other 150 currently comes from. So it would increase the amount coming into the grants fund and adding that funding for the match for these programs, for things like Owen and Ogden, for programs like that. So, any questions on the city Schedule A1 adjustments?
Well, why don't we buy the radio replacements for fire out of the medical fund?
So they're originally part of the ARPA monies, and then the extra amount that we had left, we had put into just the fleet facilities fund because we didn't know at what point they were going to need it and what that final amount would be. And just for accounting purposes, we accounted for it there. So those are all the changes I have for the city. There is a Schedule A1, and is that one of your slides, Glenn? The Schedule A1 for the RDA?
It was one of my slides, yeah. I don't know if we can
Brandon,
switch that
over
to that other one. I think it was the last slide in the.
So we rarely have a schedule. I think in my 10 years here, we've done a Schedule A1 once for the RDA, but there is one today. It's not increasing or decreasing the budget. It's just changing a use. And so we come down. It's Brandon. It's ready.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
So the changes. So that the RDA Schedule A1 change is just changing a use on the expense side of things. Because we're, instead of using that 100,000 for programming in the housing fund, we're proposing to transfer it to city using the grants. So we wanted to reflect that we're going to be changing that use in the budget. So that's all that Schedule A1 in the RDA is changing, is that use of the 100,000. Any questions on what or is proposed currently? So I'll put the numbers together for the other things that were discussed that we can and we'll update the schedule A1.
Yeah, any concerns with these Schedule A1 changes that Justin talked about? If not, then we've got those, the 200,000 for the merit and the 30,000 for the trails issue.
Any question? Okay,
Okay, thank you.
no?
Hmm.
Wow, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Glenn, are you done completely?
I am.
Okay, all right, next up is Steve, talking about capital improvement plan.
Steve, will you be offended if I get anything?
No, not at all.
Chris Burks,
My turn now.
welcome to the jungle.
I was waiting for somebody. Glenn, I don't know how this works. Should I wait a few minutes? or-
Pass the check.
Just talk loud, they'll hear
There
you.
go. So, so this is an opportunity for the council to discuss, the 5-year capital improvement plan, the 2026 through 2030 that's been proposed. Opportunity to ask questions, make changes, bring up concerns. Just a little bit of background, back on May 6th is when the capital improvement plan was introduced in work session. And since then, you've heard department budget discussions, where each department has also talked about their CIP projects. And on the agenda this evening, you'll be setting the date for the public hearing for June 17th, for the opportunity to adopt the capital improvement plan. So as we've discussed, you're looking at this 5-year plan with the budget, which includes projects that are proposed for the first year of that plan. And we're appreciative of administration and the experts in administration who are here to answer any questions you have. So yeah, happy to hear your thoughts on the plan as you look through it over the last couple of weeks.
There's one thing I would like to, it was something that was taken out of the CIP because it didn't meet the city's community plan, the roundabout versus traffic light on 1100 North in Monroe. Incidentally, I want to compliment the administration for a great job on fixing Monroe up that way. It looks great. So thumbs up for that. But I would like to make sure that we fix that issue so that traffic light can get on the CIP plan. And I don't know what's required.
Just need to amend the community plan.
Have to go to planning commission before? Okay, so let's get that going. Is it, can we sponsor it from the council to get them to review or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think as we have discussions around the general plan, if it comes up, I think that's a good opportunity to bring it up as well.
That is one of the main east-west corridors from Mountain Road back to Washington Boulevard. So I think that's kind of a crucial thing. There's a lot of traffic that goes both ways through there.
There's a lot of near misses. I don't know how many accidents there really are there, but boy, I tell you what, there's a lot of really near misses. You know, matter of fact, that house on the corner's been run into a time or two. And a light would help that. Not to mention, I think it stops some of the drag racing that happens north end of Monroe. Could really help that.
Great.
So council sponsoring,
Mhm.
but that doesn't have anything to do with.
No, not the money of it.
Okay.
No, I just want to make sure it gets back on the CIP plan.
All right. That's it?
Unless there's other questions or
Other
anything
questions?
about any of the projects in the plan.
I just have a question. I'm not following that exactly because in the notes that I've read, it shows that EN 017 the 1100 North Monroe Boulevard traffic signal 2024, the planning commission recommended that an evaluation of the roundabout be provided, a traffic signal is preferred. So that was not, that doesn't have anything to do with the actual approval of the plan.
Well, the community plan doesn't state that. If the community plan calls for a roundabout. And so that's why it's in opposition.
Oh, I see.
See? And when we did the community plan, I don't remember how many years ago, we didn't consider a light. I mean, there wasn't even one at 1100, I mean, at North Street at that point,
Mhm.
just four-way stop. But it's becoming pretty imperative, just because of the increased traffic up through there. And I think we're kind of leaning on UDOT to try to get one on 1100 in Washington. And so that will help people to leave that area and come into that area a lot easier as up their light. I don't know, Justin, do you have any idea when UDOT might be responsive to our requests?
Yes, Vice Chair Har. So we have been in talks with UDOT on 1100 North and Washington. I also know, I've been in talks with Harrisville City, and it's shown in Harrisville City in their plan as needing a light there as well to connect all the way across Washington, all the way over to what would be Harrisville Road or 89.
Yeah, it does.
It goes out that way. So there's that's in their plan. And yes, as you go all the way back to Ogden City planning a long time ago, you can see the width of the road, the way that connects, and that is a east-west corridor that goes all the way from Mountain Road all the way to Washington and then beyond, as you can see in Harrisville City's transportation plan as well. So that we have had talks with that, and so I need to probably follow up with UDOT and see where they're at with that study.
So do you think it would be wise to try to coordinate our light installation on Monroe same time they do theirs at Washington?
Yeah, I do. One of the things that I actually see traffic avoiding 1100 North in Washington because the left-hand turn really is so dangerous. And so
Or going straight through.
or yeah, or
It doesn't
going
even work.
through. So really, you're only seeing traffic turn right, making right-hand turns to go north on Washington. And so the minute that I think it's not because the public doesn't want to utilize that intersection, it's just doesn't feel safe without a light. And so I think the minute that you get a light at Washington, that you're going to immediately need a light at Monroe because the transportation is going to draw that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the timing is of all that, but that's why I want to make sure that it is a doable thing we can do. That's why it needs to be on the CIP plan. Thanks.
Okay, you bet.
There's just a question on parks. I know that a lot of the parks have been seeing improvements in the playground equipment, which has been really good to see. Just wondering in the CIP where it might address bathrooms, expansion of bathrooms in different parks that currently don't have that. Is that in just the general park improvements, or would that?
Yeah, so there are some, I think there's some I believe there's a ramp project that's looking at a bathroom, and I can't remember which park that is.
Okay.
But yes, we also are looking at adjusting in the plan in Lester Park that we talked a little bit about last week, that they'll have some improvements to some bathroom facilities. They'll be different than how they currently are there. But yeah, Monty, he's also repairing some facilities, and some of that money gets taken up. Well, actually, a lot of that money gets taken up in repairing for vandalism. So.
Are we still experiencing the vandalism that we were previously?
Not like we were last year. We are not. And so I give a lot of credit to our police officers and also to the third party utilization that they're using with having go through the parks as well to kind of curb some of that vandalism. So that's been very helpful, because that's very discouraging to our city crews to have to continually repair.
Yes, the bug-eyed plant in the air is just on the Rolling Hills Park. That's an area, that's one where a lot of community members are asking about that one, so.
Okay, so
In
that's,
my neighborhood.
yeah, so that's one we can look to within the next probably couple of years, get on. We can look to do ramp, we
Yeah.
can look to do fund other ways, and so, and get that
Yeah, thank you.
installed. I probably need, before I make any commitments, because that's something we'll need to make sure that
There's an option.
actually get it to gravity flow.
The buzz approves.
That's it, I'm done.
No, Justin, if you would just, I just need some clarity in between.
Yeah,
So when I look at parks and look at where to go, there was pavilion and restroom improvements.
Okay, 124.
124, thank you, Steve. There isn't any money budgeted in the CIP for 2026, but it sounds like there's room for some work to be done. Is there money somewhere for that that just doesn't show up on this larger report, or how do I?
so some of those CIPs, and I'll probably look to Justin Sorensen to pull out the proposed so I can look at it. But we do go through an evaluation process. I know that one of the issues that we're having is like Lauren Farr, the pool area. And so we have to make some decisions on what, what gets funded and what doesn't. And so we also look at what's sitting in the existing CIP that hasn't been spent. And so I think that we looked at, because we have had some projects that we weren't able to actually have the manpower to go and get the projects done, right? And so since it was sitting there, we're wanting to get that money spent that's already currently on the books without adding more money to it, to where we haven't got some of those projects done. And so we are currently with the new position that we got last year with kind of the project coordinator, you're gonna see quite a few projects getting knocked off. Like one of the things they're looking at is like the fencing at 9th Street. We're also looking at the dog park by Big D. You're gonna see those projects getting going this year as well. And so you're gonna start seeing some money that has been sitting there in the quarterly CIPs not being spent, getting spent on what they've been allocated for.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and I can get you a full list of that too.
No, it was just a lot of data in all this stuff and a lot of numbers, and there's a difference between the quarterly and the projected annual.
So I think that, and Justin, was I right in what I told them there, that we actually held off because we had so much sitting in the quarterly CIP that hadn't been spent yet, so we were redirecting those funds this year until those other funds got spent.
Okay.
This was noticeable because there's no dollars.
Yeah.
Not that we probably won't be coming back in next year or prior years, once we start drawing those funds down and looking to do more projects in that account.
Yep.
Okay, any other? All right. Yeesh.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't think we were gonna get to this, but, Justin Sorensen, they.
Financial one first. Yeah, thank you, Sherry. Yeah, the time of year where it can be a little confusing because we're talking about next year's stuff and talking about this year's stuff and
25, 26.
yeah. So it can be very confusing when you're overlapping fiscal years and talking about everything. So this presentation is related to this fiscal year that we are currently in and more particular, our financial information as of March 31st. Just to give you a picture of how things are looking across the city, of where we expect to be and where we're at for both revenues and expenditures for the general fund and for enterprise funds, internal service funds. So this is an opportunity to go through And I know this is all of your favorite charts that I share every time because nobody can read it because it's so small. But this is a list of all the funds, and it shows what the current budget as of March 31st was. So this would include adopted budget, any budget amendments that have taken place. And then the year-to-date revenues and year-to-date expenditures are what have been both received and spent as of March 31st. So this gives you an idea based on, and this is a list of all of our funds. So starting with our general fund, all of our enterprise funds, all the way down to all of our RDA, the MBA, and also the strike. To give you an idea. So you would anticipate at this point of the year being March 31st that if we received the funds and spent the funds in an even manner, we would be 75% received and 75% spent. And obviously that's not what actually happens. And so we'll dive in a little bit more into each of these funds in particular, but this is an overview of all of them. Looking at the general fund, this is a breakdown of all the different sources that fund the general fund. So over $59 million of the $95 million comes through taxes, property taxes, sales tax, franchise taxes. As of March 31st, we were at 75% received. This includes, I can't remember the number of distributions for property tax and sales tax. I actually have numbers that I'll show you here in a minute that actually is through today. So you can see how we're doing with our property tax and sales tax revenues. Licenses and permits, as of that, our reporting date are ahead of the budgeted amount. Our intergovernmental revenues. So this would include like our B&C road funds, our active transportation funds, where we're receiving there. Sometimes there's a lag there. Charges for services. So this is all of our fees for our various things that fee schedules, whether that be Marshall White, recreation, parks, different things like that. Fines and forfeitures for the justice court. And then other financing sources. This one will always look a little off. This would include any use of fund balance, which there wouldn't be any actual revenues associated with it. It's just a budget mechanism. But it does include also the transfers in from both the utilities and also the transfer in from BDO to fund our debt payment for the Marshall White Center. So that's included in that $8 million that's been received. Any questions on general fund revenues in total before we go to more particular taxes? Okay. And I know I apologize, this is a lot of numbers to throw out and might be a lot to digest, but so the top section is as of March 31st of breaking out how sales tax, property taxes, franchise taxes, and our other taxes, which is our fee in lieu, motor vehicle registrations, where they were at through March 31st. But I think it's more telling to look at where we're at through today. So for sales tax, we've received 10 out of our 12 months of distribution as of today. It lags behind a month. So seeing that we're 84% received, 10 months would be 83%. So we are on target to be at or slightly above our budget amount for sales tax, which is really good compared to where last year finished. So it'll be interesting to see where that growth is year over year from last year to this year. The prior year was just over a 1% growth from fiscal year 23 to 24. So from 24 to 25, we'll see what that is. Property taxes, again, we've received 10 of our 12 months of distribution. The last portion, we get a large distribution in the spring for any true up and also for personal property. So a majority has been received for the real property taxes. Franchise taxes, this is for 9 months of the 12 months because we have a lag there with some of those franchisees and when we receive their payments. So this represents 9 months of our franchise taxes that we've received. And then other taxes, again, this is our fee in lieu is 10 months of the 12 months that we would anticipate receiving. So in total, we're right on target or slightly above target where we've anticipated some of these, mainly sales tax, where it'll come in at. So it's really good. So this is looking at expenditures for the general fund by department. Again, you would expect about 75% spent as of March 31st. In that list, everything is below that amount except for non-departmental. Non-departmental is where we budget for our debt payments. And so that will always trend higher because of timing of when those are made. And it's a whole amount for the whole year. So that's why our non-departmental trends
higher than what that amount would expect. Everything else is within targeted amounts of what we would anticipate. So this would be budgets for both personnel and operations for all the departments in the general fund. Looking at the enterprise funds, so this is comparing their budget versus their revenues and expenditures. And again, it's a little small, but the one on the far left, that is the water fund. Going across is you have the water fund, the sanitary fund, the refuse fund, airport, the golf fund, recreation or parking and mobility, property management fund, which is BDO, storm, and then medical. You can see that the water fund, the budget looks really high. The portion of that is because of capital. As we roll forward any unused budget related to capital, that will increase that budget, but you can see where we're at, revenues versus expenses there. And then the same thing typically happens with our other utilities that have capital outlay. Once we get to this point of the year when we've carried forward prior year CIP balances. So the sanitary fund looks higher and storm looks higher as well. The property management fund, that one looks interesting as well, because the way we budget for that is we budget to, this is where we account for the revenues received from BDO lease revenue, which as of the end of the third quarter, we have received 3 quarters worth of payments. But the budget looks so big because we also budget a use of fund balance which is from prior year, that then is transferred out for various uses. That was part of the adopted budget this year. So that's why that one, the expenses may look higher, because we've already recorded all those transfers out of that fund. Any questions on any of the enterprise funds? Our internal service funds, so this is fleet facilities, IT, and risk management. Again, sometimes there's a lag there where expenses will exceed revenues, whereas in a lot of these is internal service funds, they will experience the expenses, and then later on the revenues are recorded when they charge back for those expenses. And so a lot of times we'll see that where we're exceeding revenues, but as of this point, there's no concerns there on where we're at with any of those funds. With that, is there any questions? I know there's a lot more data, a lot more information in the packet about all the other funds, but these are the main ones that we've usually reviewed when we did this financial checkup. Are there any questions? Can you go back to page 2 screens? One more. So you mentioned the property management, that's income from the BDO lease revenue, that 39,322,000. Is that what you said?
The revenue is actually like 15 million from BDO lease revenue. The budget looks so much higher because we also budget a use of fund balance. And it also includes any prior balance for improvements out there that we've done, where we transfer from our old RDA area. And those funds were used for improvements out there that were in agreement with BDO, that they're doing maintenance and improvements out there to infrastructure. And so that budget, that 39 million, includes that as well, for them to be able to do projects out there.
So the expenditure side of that, does that include the expenditures for the work that's being done on improvements that are made on BDO?
Yes, so yeah, and that is in the report, some of the expenditures that they've had out there, and that would be part of that fund, part of that 19 million. Most of that 19 million spent would be transfers though, to the general fund, to the CIP fund. But a portion of that would be related to what they're doing and the work they're doing out there.
Very good.
Good question. Any other questions? Great.
This week, the other one. So then the other quarterly report to review with you is our capital improvement plan and where we're at spending to date. Let's see, here we go. So obviously really exciting. The Marshall White Center is open. We're getting close to spending down all the funds associated with that. So I wanted to share a picture of that, a couple pictures from the Marshall White Center. So here's a picture of the playground over there.
But as a reminder, as we go through this process each year of all the different sources that we use, that we try to, there's a lot of non-city funds that are used. I know there's, questions on how we fund our projects. We have as a city, are really blessed to have BDO as a source to help fund a lot of projects. It's been something that's really been helpful, and I think what we've been able to accomplish. We've also used medical funds to help fund projects, general funds. We also have different restricted taxes that are received that are used for road projects and sidewalk projects. And then also other different types of grants that we go out and get. And it's really exciting with our 2 grant writer positions, the work that they've done, especially in relation to this, the public services grant writer, and being able to go out and find funding. And, as we start to see those awards come through, you'll see those through budget actions. And so it's really exciting to see as they continue to go look for ways to fund projects. So. And currently we have in the quarterly report, there's 106 total projects across all the CIP fund and all of our enterprise funds that have projects. There's currently 106 projects that are at some stage, whether that's planning, design, construction. And so just to give you some information there. Here's some pictures of, wow, I forgot to adjust my title there, but this is pictures I received from the airport of the terminal expansion that's going on. So here's some information there. And then this is a reminder of the amount of money that's been appropriated through the budget this year. So again, thank you as a council and your efforts in being able to help so that we can fund these projects through the budget, through budget openings and through the adopted budget. So gives you kind of an idea of the amount of money. And this doesn't include what we appropriated last week for the water line and airport or 2 weeks ago. So quite a bit of funding for projects this year. And this does not include any projects that had funding from prior years that we carried over. So that is one question. At the end of each year, whatever projects have not been completed and there's still funding available, we will carry those funds forward. And so it gets a little confusing there when you talk about next year projects like the parks one, because we do have funding in that project right now. And so through the budget process, we didn't propose any additional funding, knowing that we still have some funds available. So, and then just to give you an update on how much on spending during quarter 3, we spent just shy of $500,000 in the CIP fund. It would have been larger. There was if you look through the packet, you'll see the Marshall White center line shows a large negative amount. All that is we are accounting for the ARPA funds in a different fund, and that's part of our Marshall White's funding. And during the quarter, we had adjusted an invoice from the CIP fund to our grants fund. So it made it look like we had a negative amount of spending on Marshall White, but that's not what it was. It was just fixing where that expense should have come from. So just to, if any of you see that in your packet, I don't want you to be alarmed that there's a huge negative 1.7 million on Marshall White, because that's not the case. And then you can see the spending on our utilities, a lot of that towards master plan project improvements. And then of course in the airport, most of the 600,000 is for the terminal expansion that's happening out there. Any questions? So here's some pictures that I received. So this is up the canyon again, from work being done up with the canyon. Any questions on CIP?
Thanks for adding those pictures though, because otherwise I'm a lot of words.
I'll be honest, this morning I got it and I try to email a few days in advance requesting pictures from project managers, and not to do that till this evening.
No.
I'm grateful I was able to get some feedback back to share with you. I think it paints a picture as to what.
Yeah, something concrete.
Not just numbers on a page.
Yeah. Any questions for Justin? No? All right.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Justin. All right. I think we're gonna get there. Council business. Glenn? Council comments.
I have a question. I have a constituent who is constantly asking me about the Mike Bachman property in this right near the water treatment plant. And he informs me that the city purchased that property. It's right across from the Northrop Grumman Training Center. And he wants to know the purpose of why the city purchased that, and I just am at a loss as to explain why. He also asks where the money came from for that, so is that a fair question to ask? I don't know, that probably happened before Mike on the council, so.
I could take a stab, but I'm not qualified to really tell you absolutely. Something in the admin probably could. I know they're gonna, that a caretaker occupy it.
I could take it for the water treatment plant.
And but where the money came from, I can't remember. But it's part of the water project. It's part of the water line project, I believe. Is that right?
Also for the train.
It was purchased before.
Yeah.
Bonding took place.
Listening back there, are you talking? Hey,
Mike Bachman property?
Yes.
That's across from Northrop Grumman. I have a
Yes.
constituent who is constantly asking me about that property, where the funding came from to purchase
Yes.
the property and the purpose of what the city will use it.
So there's actually been a few key properties in Ogden Canyon that we have purchased. It was through water utility funds. We have major infrastructure going through that water or through that canyon. We have both a 24 and a 36-inch water line. We also, adjacent to that property, we have some very important infrastructure where we actually have we call it a Black Point Weir. It was installed a long time ago. We call it Black Point Weir. It's just was an old term that was used from a long time ago. And we call it the same, but it's really an area we have some critical infrastructure with how we convey water down the canyon from our water treatment plant. And so strategically for the water treatment plant and also the work that we're doing in Ogden Canyon, because when the line was originally put in Ogden Canyon, there was a lot of room to put water lines in Ogden Canyon. Now, not so much so. So we needed some strategic properties to be able to stage and prepare for this water line project. So, because we've also purchased property in the Cobbles area too.
And that came out of the water utility fund?
Yes.
I don't know if you ever visited that property when Mike Bachman lived there, but that 36-inch water line is probably 30 feet and equal in height to their second story bathroom window. So it's such a close proximity. That changing of that pipe was going to make it really hard for that property owner. You know, I don't believe I'd have wanted to live there during all that. That'd been pretty awful.
So you probably explained this before, but I have no recollection of this, and it's another question I've had from constituents. Do we own access to the Bamberger, where the old Bamberger train track used to be? Does the city own that, or who actually owns that?
So in 1932, the Ogden City obtained all the rights for the old Bamberger rail line that went completely through Ogden Canyon.
But not that way.
Correct, yeah.
What'd you say?
But not that way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and just from the mouth of the canyon to the upper end of the canyon.
So what's the plan with property owners who've encroached into that area?
So we are working through there, and it's not only we've identified some that are really tight and some that is actually encroached in to be able to either get property to work around them or also how to make constructability work, right? Because when you're dealing with the 36-inch pipe, that's 3 to 4 foot deep, that you're getting down there pretty deep. And to safely be able to do that, it causes some problems. And so we have to work through some constructability. That's one of the reasons why we did a CMGC contract, which is construction management general contractor contract, to do this pipeline and utilize the expertise of Whitaker Construction. We also have encroachments more than just the structures. We have other things throughout the canyon where we are concerned on drain fill lines crossing our septic lines that might be crossing that pipeline. And so we are gonna need to be able to work through with property owners on how that can properly work and still meet standards.
So there's no sewer line that runs down. through
There is
there.
no sewer line through the canyon,
Interesting.
They're all on their own septic.
from what I understand.
Okay.
We hope.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, we will.
How did you think it?